This is Tara Gronhovd with the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast powered by Align, and this is episode 25. This week, Michelle Pape is back to continue our amazing leadership conversation. Please go back and listen to our first episode with Michelle last week. We've already heard from many people how much they're enjoying learning from Michelle's leadership journey. And today we're going to dive deeper into how she's built community and expanded her missional impact by investing in others. Welcome to the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast, where everyone is a leader and leadership starts with you. I'm Tara.
And I'm Pamela.
Thank you for listening and inviting us along on your leadership journey.
We want to welcome you back to part 2 with Michelle Pape. Michelle has been a leadership coach and an entrepreneur. She is the founder of the Executive Peer Group, which has been taking place with women in central Minnesota. We're going to link the full bio that we shared in part 1, and we really encourage you to go back and listen. Michelle has been a leadership coach that Tara and I have known for many years. Tara a little bit longer than myself, but I say, Michelle, I credit you because we got to work with each other for longer than 3 months because you came into the picture for both of us as we sat in your home on your couch. And I'm just going to say, Michelle, that you named the fear that was in the room. And I don't think it was something that Tara or I could name, but you specifically called it forward and really helped us dig down to the fear about what was arising. And as we were noticing this beautiful partnership, why would we be afraid of it? How do you confidently show up that way?
I actually had a client one time that said to me, and I'll never forget this, the CEO that I worked with for years, he said, Michelle, you like to do that. You like to say those hard things and like you take pleasure almost in it. I was like, I do not. I do not. And I think referenced it, I think in episode 1 that when things are happening, whatever it is, whatever it's called, but in some way, shape, or form, it's some kind of dysfunction. When that appears, when that's active, people aren't being their best versions of themselves, either individually or collectively. And I hate that. And I don't know if I've ever really thought about this, but the only way that I've ever been able to change it is to like invite the elephant into the room and say, look at the elephant. He's really big. And he takes up too much space in this room. And how do we get rid of him so everyone can just be different?
I think it's part of what makes you a remarkable coach and facilitator and friend, Michelle, is you're willing to risk the relationship for the sake of that person becoming or that team becoming better. Hey everyone, this is Tara. You know how some podcasts will pause in the middle to give you an advertisement or a word from their sponsors? Well, we don't have sponsors, but we do have an important opportunity that we want to share with you. Listen, I think that you and I can agree that the old school top-down leadership model just doesn't work anymore. It would be nice if it did because it is easier to just command and have people pay attention. But honestly, people don't work that way because relationships don't work that way. And leadership no longer works that way. And so we have developed a program called Grounded Leadership. And we are seeing incredible results with the cohorts that we're currently running. From emerging and new leaders to executives and business owners, leaders at every level are growing and grounding in their leadership through this program. Grounded Leadership is a comprehensive practice that ensures emotional maturity while encouraging individual growth and building thriving teams. Listen, titles are about authority, but they don't really influence change. Our leadership practice is what determines our ability to influence others. This journey is ideal for all leaders who are ready to maximize their potential, take responsibility for their influence. We have a cohort starting in January of 2024. It's going to be a mixed cohort of leaders from across the country from different organizations, and we really think that you would enjoy it. Not only that, we think you would find high value and there would be a really high ROI for you, your leadership, and your team. If this is at all of interest to you, please reach out. In the show notes, we're going to have a PDF that you can click and see all the program details, but also you could email me, tara@aligntransform.com, schedule a quick 15 to 30 minute consult to get some of your questions answered, and we can determine if this is a program that's a fit for you and if you're a fit for the program. If this is of interest to you, we hope to hear from you. And now back to the podcast. Michelle, has been my coach on and off for almost 20 years, as we said in episode 1. And I'll never forget, I know we started working together in 2004. And 2 years later, I was still coaching with Michelle, and I was nearing my 30th birthday. I was young. And I don't even remember what I was stuck about, but I was stuck, and it must have really upset you that I was so stuck. And you fired me on the day of my 30th birthday party. You fired me because you loved me. And I knew that was why. And it hurt and it sucked and it was what I needed. But you were willing to risk. And I've seen you do this in other areas. So you're willing to risk someone continuing to hire you or work with you. You're willing to risk the discomfort that might happen in the relationship. You're willing to risk a lot interpersonally and maybe even professionally in order to do what's best to help people grow. I think it's a superpower of yours, Michelle. And I think it's very scary for a lot of leaders to think about that kind of risk.
I get why it's scary and it is risky. And just so your audience knows, it doesn't always work out. Like people sometimes won't talk to you afterwards, like ever, or avoid you, or maybe even speak not necessarily so well of you. And so it does come with risks. I just don't know any other way. But I've also seen the other side of it where relationships get stronger and trust builds. I had an experience years ago. I was taught this thing by one of my very first mentors in life was a man by the name of Dale Riley. I worked with him at Murray Fish Company. He was the president of a chain here called Byerly's at the time. And he taught me about this thing called For the Good of the Order, where you, at the end of a meeting, you ask everybody to tell you what they're really thinking, to have the meeting, after the meeting, in the meeting. And so everybody hears from everybody. And I've been in meetings. I was in a meeting one time where I had established what we would do at the end of each meeting. And I had a woman say to me as a facilitator during that meeting, Michelle, you attacked me in this meeting. And I was like, oh, the whole leadership team is hearing this. And the rules were that you can't respond. You just have to listen. But I told them, you just have to listen in the moment, but you can talk afterwards, and you probably need to and should afterwards. And so immediately after the meeting, we just sat there, the two of us, and just said, oh my gosh, I usually know when I've stepped in it. And now would be the point where I'd be apologizing, but I have no idea what happened. I have no idea how I disrespected you and what. And her shoulder just fell and she said, Michelle, you didn't do anything, but you told us that we should share what we really are thinking and feeling in the moment at the end of the meeting. And I trusted you enough to do that. But you really didn't do anything. It was just on me. I'm in a bad spot and I just got triggered. And you said we could do it and I did it. And so the beauty that comes out of this is her calling me out. And I hadn't actually really done anything. Not that I haven't, because I have really poorly facilitated things before and wanted to kick myself from here to kingdom come. But then that relationship was so much stronger. And we got to come back to the next meeting and tell everybody because it was like very awkward, right? The awkward, oh geez. And we got to tell everybody the story. And so it built trust with everybody. And to this day, I still work with all those people. And it's been years.
And you made me earn my way back into coaching. So not only did she fire me, she said I couldn't come back until I made progress in these areas. So I had to earn it back. I had to prove that I was willing to grow myself. I'm willing to invest. I think invest as much as you were investing, which is fair from a coaching perspective. I think it's really frustrating when we're coaching and you want it more or are willing to invest more than the person you're coaching. So I think that's a fair request, but it wasn't a comfortable request. But I just want to say there are going to be people listening to this. I know because of the impact that you've had and because it's you, there's going to be people listening. And so on behalf of all of those listeners who have been impacted by you, thank you for the risks that you take to grow others.
Yeah.
And I would say that it is so much more of a trust builder than something that fractures a relationship. It does allow for the conversation to come back and for you to really say and name the feelings underneath. I love that this person said this is really so much more about me as a person experiencing this group and what's going on with me than about you at all. Michelle, I've seen you challenge people to live unoffendable. and being able to recognize where our own blind spots are within ourselves. As you were speaking of that young leader that was sharing about someone else in the room, in the last episode, you shared a story about calling someone forward to be their best selves. And when you talk about someone else to me, you will eventually talk about me to someone else. And you don't want to be that person. And so you're saying, I'm going to say the hard thing. You build trust with the room. You build trust within the person that doesn't recognize what they're doing and that you genuinely care for them, which is the foundation of trust. When people know that you care, then they're willing to just walk through this process with you, whether it feels uncomfortable or not. I want to encourage you leaders that if you've ever considered taking that kind of risk, find a coach, one that is willing to say hard things to you so that you can then, in a curious, compassionate way, ask those same questions of others.
So, Michelle, you developed Executive Peer Group, I think 11 years ago, almost 11 years ago.
Yep.
And those groups, I think you have 4 of them here in the St. Cloud area. Next Monday has 4 of them. You've sold your business, just recently retired, semi-retired. But there are 4 executive peer groups. And at some point, you decided to go even bigger to impact more people. And you developed an event called the Summit. And it's called the Women of Influence Summit. I don't know if it's referred to that anymore. Now everyone just shorthands it to the Summit. But what inspired you to develop that kind of event? And I can attest to, but maybe tell us a little bit about how it's different than most leadership events.
Yeah, thank you for asking about the Women of Influence Summit, and we do call it both. So what inspired me was the reality that not everyone could participate in something like EPG because it required time, 4 hours a month. It required, we talked earlier about titles don't really matter, except for they do in that setting. So that people can all benefit. You have to have people more at the same level. So it required time, it required position, I'll just say, or influence, and it required financial capacity. And I realized that not all the women that we could be serving had access to those 3 things. And so I wanted something that more women could participate in. And I also felt like the 4 hours a month were never enough because we wanted to go deeper in things. So it's like, how could we spend more time together and invite more people? And I don't know if I realized it at the time, but I've since learned this, that foundation in EPG came into each room each year of the summit. And it created a really caring, less maybe professional, more personal feel that people felt comfortable in. And so that is part of what set it apart because people would walk in, there's just a lot of hugging and tears and joy and seeing each other. And EPG members know how to welcome. At my party, I remember taking a couple of people and just literally people that didn't know anybody and taking them and placing them in a group of people saying, this person doesn't know anybody here. And just knowing that group of people would know how to welcome them and make them a part of the conversation. And so I would say how the Women of Influence Summit is different is that it's hard to feel alone there. And it's different because we don't look for women that have been speaking on a stage and sharing a message. They're all important, but we don't look for women that are polished and have shared a certain message on a stage 100 times. We look for women that have accomplished something through vulnerability and through error and struggle and are willing to be real on the stage and talk about their successes, but also show under the covers of how hard that was and difficult. And we pick mostly local women that people can relate to. That we all put the women on the stage on a pedestal in some way, shape, or form. But when you see a woman up on a stage that maybe your kids go to school with, or you know her company, or you know her husband, or there's some tie to her that she seems a little less distant and more like, I could do that too. And we feature a variety of women at different levels. This year, the theme is lead where you are. And the video series is going to feature a woman that's 20 or 22 and a woman that's 75, ages in between, because we wanted to show that wherever you are in your life, you have the responsibility to lead yourself and therefore others well. Yeah, it is very different. And that's where the world is confused about what leadership is and isn't. It is all things strategic. It is about aligning resources. It's about motivating and inspiring people, but those aren't where you start. Those are the things you have to weave in.
It starts with relationship. And I think that's the humanity that you taught your entire career and coached and led towards, is for the sake of the relationship, for the good of the order, is for the sake of the relationship. And I've only missed one summit because I was very sick, and I still feel really bad about missing it, because every summit you leave feeling connected and inspired. But the connection piece, I think, is what's amazing. And that's, I think, partly what you've baked into it. You also have an amazing team. I know many of those team members who work with the Next Monday Summit, who make sure that it's baked in. And, but you're right. I don't think people leave there feeling alone, even if they walk in not knowing anyone or not knowing many people.
Yeah,
It's truly
it's true.
amazing.
I know I said in the first conversation that one of the people that saw something in me was this gentleman by the name of Tim Spiker, who wrote the book, The Only Leaders Worth Following, has led me on this leadership journey that I'm just wrapping up after 4 years. And what he did is he gave me context for the things that I've just intuitively known and felt in my heart, but he gave me words, not only just words, but definitions. Like, there's this thing called humility in the world, and people have gotten it wrong. They think humility is about shrinking.
Self-deprecation.
Yeah, and that is not humility. That has nothing to do with humility. Humility is about being able to admit when you're wrong. It's about being others focused and being selfless, but it's about being eager to acknowledge other people. In none of that definition does it say you should shrink. But I've shared that definition with many people, and I take them piece by piece, and they say, oh, I acknowledge people. And I always remind them, but are you eager to acknowledge other people? There's a big difference between acknowledging people and encouraging people and being eager to do. There's a big gap between those two things. And most of us aren't eager. I'm actually eager.
Yeah. And Michelle, can you define that a little bit? I know, what do you mean when you say eager? Is it that you're waiting? You're so secure within yourself that you want to see people also believe in themselves that way? What do you mean when you say eager?
Thank you so much for asking that question, because those are the questions that I'm just saying to whatever leader is out there listening. When you don't understand something, ask the questions, because some of us just have said things or known things that we make a lot of assumptions, and we learn so much when someone says, but I don't really get it. Thank you for asking that. So what I mean, there's so many different ways I could look at it, but the first thing that comes to my mind is, so in the transition of ownership of Next Monday, I was eager for 2.5 years for the people of Next Monday in that community to know this new owner to be Becky Espy. I was eager for them to know her. And so I would remind them of who she was. I would remind them of her capability. I would put her out front and I would sit in the back. And so I was eager to let her shine, because that's what we're supposed to do. I actually remember an EPG member one time who talked about, she's really good at what she does. I'll just give her a plug. Rebecca with Tom James. She's a clothier, and people love how she works with them. Her clients love her, but she wants them to know that she's not the only one that can help them. So she learned a long time ago to talk about her staff. So when she wasn't available to answer a question or whatever, the people would know who she worked with so they could call her. But she had to be eager to take the spotlight off of herself and put it on somebody else. She was eager to do that. When you're working on a project or you're in a meeting, being eager to say, hey, I know you have a thought about that, and I think it's a brilliant one. Would you please share? Being eager to call people out for what their contribution can be. There's so many faces to that.
So, Michelle, you referenced a few times the leadership journey that you're just wrapping up with the Imperio. And I know that you're someone who's always growing. What have you learned more recently? So you're learning all the time, but maybe can you share with us a leadership lesson that you've taken away more recently? Maybe even in this transition out of your business that you built?
So, Tara, as you asked that question, my mind is just flooded with learnings and it's a little paralyzing. And I'm giving myself a chance to just pause. Sometimes it's okay to just pause. Silence is not a bad thing. And so I'm remembering this last phase of our journey is around being secure and settled. And the thing that we talk about all the time is come what may, I'll be okay, come what may. And I sit here today smiling ear to ear and in the same vein want to start crying because I'm in this transition and I don't quite know what to do. And come what may, I'll be okay, come what may. So I really learned that come what may, I'll be okay. And the things are uncomfortable sometimes. And I am really secure and settled. And I think one of the things I've learned, Tara, and it just really bugs me, but it's true, is that I've said several times that we are going to make mistakes. And I swear my mistakes more and more are things that I had no intention of doing, but I did, and I hurt someone. And I can't even, where did that even come from? I can't even believe I did that or that happened. And it's going to be okay because your real friends will forgive you. I said something the other day that hurt someone that I love so much. And I'm pretty sure it is probably more about her, but my timing was poor. That's another thing I've learned is that we often say we could do better. And I've learned to change that to I could do better. Don't hide behind this we thing. Admit your piece in it. So even if somebody, maybe I said something and it triggered them and that's really about them, when I looked back on it, my timing was not good. So I think I've just learned I'm going to be okay, come what may.
Yes. Amen to that. I love that quote and I use it often. I think that is John Ott. And
Yes.
what Tim will
Yes.
say. And he always wants to give him credit,
Yes.
which is so Tim because
Yes.
he's so confidently humble. And I do want to ask, you are now in a season that perhaps could freak out a lot of leaders, a lot of people. You have transitioned in many ways over these last months. You have sold a home. You have moved an hour north of where you've been at. You've sold a business. There's many transitions that are coming in your life. If I could ask a question of what's your biggest challenge, but that would probably last us a long time here for the podcast. But as you're thinking today, Michelle, as to what, I know you're intentional in the everyday. What was presented to you this morning as you got out of bed and you have opportunities in front of you today, whether it's personally or professionally, that you feel you want to grow in and it's challenging? And everybody in this world can face challenges in a way that they're living braced, or they can face challenges in a way that their hands are open. And so tell us, perhaps keeping it real and authentic, and you can share at your comfort level. But what is a challenge in this season for you that you woke up with today? And I know this will encourage our listeners.
So full transparency, I know I didn't wake up to it, but your question just reminded me of something that's been really loud. And what triggered it for me, and the thing is purpose. The thing that triggered it was this past weekend, my husband and I went to see The Sound of Freedom. It's a story about trafficking of children and a story about a brother and sister. And stories are powerful and I want their story to be heard by many. But you can go to something like that. And in my past, I would go to something like that and I'd be thinking, I need to do something about trafficking. I'm doing something about trafficking by sharing and encouraging people to go to that movie and to remember that it's not about the movie. It's not about the actors or even the real life guy behind the story. It's about those two children. And it's about us all paying attention and sharing their story so we can make a change. But the old me would think I should do something more specifically about trafficking. And the me that now knows who I am and who God created said, that's not specifically where I'm going to have you do your life's work. But I transitioned into retirement earlier than I had planned because when we were studying the principle of empathy, I looked at my husband one day and realized that he's retired 4 times. He's 76. And I was going to have a regret of not spending more time with him. And I want to, and I still have to live my purpose. So how do I walk this line of living my purpose, which is me being in connection with people, but also being in his presence? And when I'm talking about his, I'm talking about my husband, being with him, making sure he knows he's a priority. So finding my way to live my purpose in this new phase and still honoring my husband and letting go of the fact that he might not always feel honored, but I know I am honoring him and have to know that God has more for me to do in addition to that.
So, Michelle, as we wrap up, the last question for you that we have is related to that. There are listeners who are looking at the last 5 to 10 years of their career. They've been in leadership. And I know that you're just going through the transition, so you don't have it all figured out. But 5 to 7 years ago, what advice do you wish you would have given yourself?
Come what may, I'll be okay. And it's just trust who you were created to be and go there. Figure it out. Pamela just gave credit for John Ott for come what may, I'll be okay, come what may. And I have to give credit to Jeff Gow, who told his people for years, he was the president CEO of Marco, a local company here. He told people to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable, especially as it relates to who you are and the callings on your mind and your heart. And back to Pamela's question about what does that really mean? When people talk about a calling, that can seem so big. And what does that even mean? It's no, just pay attention to what you feel like you're supposed to do. And maybe you don't know, but maybe that's a calling to just get quiet and to ask the question of others or of your God or whoever you go to just keep figuring it out. It's important. You have work to do. You have people to love and to serve, and they need you. And that could be as a father, could be as a business leader, could be as a friend. There's so many ways that we lead and have impact.
Thank you for all the ways that you have shown up in so many ways in both Tara and my life. And I'm going to let Tara finish this because she's known you longer. But I do want to I want to say that one of the true gifts of becoming a friend and being in a coaching relationship with someone who has such a high purpose and calling is that you are allowed to be in multiple spaces with someone. And instead of just sharing time across a coaching table, to really be known and to continue to know. And so I think one of my greatest joys in knowing this next season that you are in is that a delight for me is to know that we will have continued conversations and I'll have continued surprise phone calls that ask how I'm doing. And for someone who asks that of 10 to 12 people a day in counseling sessions or business sessions, the value of someone like yourself reaching out randomly like that means the world. Thank you for being the real deal.
My pleasure.
I don't really want to be done with the conversation. But I promise I'm wrapping up, Pamela. But something, listeners, that you should know about Michelle is, I don't know, I'm sure she has a system. She's never shared that system with me, but you will, if you are in her sphere, she will randomly reach out. She will randomly text or call or leave you a voicemail. There is nothing like a Michelle voicemail. So as leaders, I would just encourage people to think about using even that technique, that tip to say, what are you doing to connect? And those texts, even when I'm actively in coaching with Michelle, those texts aren't to hold me accountable to something. Those texts or those messages are about connecting or sharing an encouragement or even what you're thinking about regarding me or my talents or my abilities or my growth. Michelle has had a unique spot to watch my growth over the years. And I can tell you that we're doing this podcast, the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast, because we continue to learn and we continue to grow. But I probably first learned the value of growth from you, Michelle. So thank you for being a mirror, an encouragement, but also a mirror to reflect back that growth.
And thank you both for being willing to be imperfect and vulnerable with your audience, and for continuing to find ways to ground and grow yourself so that you can model it for other people. Because it really does matter. And you do have people to serve, both of you. And I know you are. So bravo, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. There will be a lot of resources and show notes, all the books and different resources that we've mentioned today. So we hope that you enjoyed listening. We'd love to hear from you. If you've listened and been encouraged or learned something, hop on one of our social media posts about this episode and just let us know what you're thinking. The weird thing about podcasting is that we don't necessarily know what people are thinking after they listen. And so we'd love to hear from you. And we know you've been encouraged by Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Come on.